how to ensure a successful Power Apps project. So what does this session look like? So we're going to be talking first off about different types of Power Apps. Now, there's a few different types, and quite often people misinterpret what are Power Apps. So we're going to cover off the different types to make sure that you're comfortable understanding the different types of Power Apps and why you would choose one over another. Then we're going to talk about planning your Power Apps project. So actually the steps which are involved during that planning phase. Then we're going to talk about the design and development of a Power App and be talking about things like user interfaces and some do's and don'ts when it comes to designing your application. As well as that, we're going to be talking about testing and the deployment process of your Power App as well. And then finally, we're going to wrap up by talking a bit about what you should be putting in place from a support framework, as well as general maintenance of your Power App once it's gone live. So also at the end, as I said before, we are going to have a Q&A. If you've got any questions at all, please feel free to use the Q&A option at the top of the webinar. Drop your questions in there. Also, you'll see that there's a link in there I've already posted, which is a link if you wanted to contact us about anything that you've seen in today's webinar. You can use the link inside there as well. If you're watching this recorded afterwards, there's a link in the description below. So let's jump in. Knowing your Power Apps. So as I say, there's different types of Power Apps, and they fit in different ways depending on what you're trying to achieve. So I'm going to cover off what the 3 different types of Power Apps are, and then I've got a really useful table which helps break down how you choose the right Power App for the specific project that you're looking at actually deploying a Power App for. So the first is Canvas Power Apps. Now, to be honest, this is probably the most well-known Power App. When most people say Power Apps, quite often they're referring to Canvas Power Apps. And for a long period of time, most of the apps which were built as Power Apps were Canvas Power Apps. Essentially, the sort of slogan of this is to digitally transform business processes with low code. You can build a Canvas Power App using an interface which, to be honest, is not too dissimilar to PowerPoint. It's kind of got slides or what they call pages, and it's all using low code, which basically is the same formulas which run Excel documents is what is used inside of these Canvas Power Apps. So it's called Canvas because it's all about having a visual appeal, and Canvas apps help you design and build these kind of visual looking applications. Compared to the other 2 types of apps that we're going to talk about, you've probably got the most control over the look and feel with a Canvas Power App. These provide a kind of simplistic environment to create what you need from scratch. The reason why it's called Canvas is because you literally start from a blank canvas, a blank slate essentially, and then build using predetermined functionality. So things like buttons, forms, drop-down boxes, things like that, you can drag and drop around the page how you see fit. And rather than using complicated coding or programming tools, you have an easy drag and drop interface programmed with Excel-like formulas. So like I was saying before, this is all built using low-code formulas. You don't need to be an advanced programmer. You can build very simplistic apps with Canvas apps in maybe days, weeks, rather than traditional types of applications, maybe programming with C# or something like that, which maybe take months, if not years, potentially to build out an app of a similar type of capability as what you could do with a Canvas app in a quarter of the time. So that's Canvas apps. Now, the next type of app is known as a model-driven Power App. Now, the reason why it's called model-driven is that it's because it's all about the kind of the data model. And in fact, actually, in contrast to a Canvas Power App, you actually start off your build, your development of a model-driven app by looking at the data first. So you forget the kind of user interface element of it, and you look at the tables, the relationships, the fields which you're trying to capture. And then actually the model-driven app itself almost springs the user interface itself. Now, there is some pros and cons to this. As I say, with Canvas apps, you're in complete control of what it looks like. Whereas with a model-driven app, you basically only have a handful of different types of user interfaces that you can essentially choose from that are pre-created for you. There's not a huge amount of kind of changing the look and feel. Yes, you can change the colors a little bit, but every single model-driven app basically looks and feels the same, regardless. Whereas Canvas apps, they can look wildly different. Now, model-driven apps, you build up from the shape of your core business data and processes in Dataverse to model the forms, the views of the data, and other types of components. Model-driven apps are quickly generate great sort of UI. So, as I say, you can't necessarily customize it, but it's actually taking a lot of the kind of load of the user interface development away from you. And one of the other benefits as well is that you know that the user interface is just going to work. In something like model-driven apps, where you've got the ability to create a new form, new item, delete things, add things, all the kind of CRUD kind of things that you can do in applications, you have to kind of build those from scratch with a Canvas app. With model-driven apps, they're just built for you. So that is probably one of the main kind of key benefits of a model-driven app. Then we've got our final type of app, which is known as Power Pages. Now, this still kind of falls under the Power Apps kind of world. It's formerly known as Power Apps Portals, and Power Apps Portals essentially was derived again from a kind of Dynamics kind of background. But think of it as a way of building anonymous portals for people. Maybe it's like external, like customers or suppliers, or I've seen Power Pages being used for all sorts of different things. We've helped build things like application processes using Power Pages, membership portals. So we recently built a membership portal for an organization which was essentially managing members that were paying an annual subscription for a certain type of service that was being provided, and they gave them a members portal so they could log in, they could check their subscriptions, they could get downloads related to their memberships and things like that, and that was all managed through Power Pages. One of the main things why you would use Power Pages over the other two is because you have this ability for it to be an external facing website. It can be surfaced via Google if you wanted to, just treat it like it's a normal website. However, it is still kind of the Power Apps kind of back end in Dataverse. All the data is stored inside of your Microsoft 365 tenant, and there is elements of kind of a drag and drop type of interface that you can use with Power Pages as well. So how do we choose which is the best Power App for what we're trying to achieve? Now, I've put together this fairly simplistic table. Now, as a kind of, I am a qualified solution architect in Power Platform, and to get that accreditation, you have to know quite a lot about all the different types of apps and what they do and things like that. So to try and boil all that information down into a table is pretty difficult. But this is just a really quick way of trying to identify, based on your requirements and the features that you want, what app is going to be best for your scenario. So for example, integrations and connectors. So integrating with third-party apps and data and things like that, all three could do that. Customizing the user interface, as I say, Canvas apps, you can do that nice and easily. Model-driven apps, you can't. You have to use the user interface that you've been provided with. Pages, now, this is kind of a bit on the fence in the fact that you have out-of-the-box user interface that Microsoft provides. And if you have more advanced skills, so not so much low code, but more like if you know about HTML, JavaScript, CSS, you can build web pages for Power Pages like it is a website, so you can customize that user interface. Responsive, so natively, so Canvas apps isn't responsive natively, and in fact, actually, to get it to work properly, there is quite a bit of work to do there. Whereas model-driven apps is, you can spin up an app in a couple of days and it's already responsive. The UI, as I say, you take it for granted how easy and simplistic it is, but actually if you were to create a responsive app with Canvas, it's going to take a lot longer to do. Same with kind of with the pages, there are some elements of it which are responsive, but if you want anything additional customizable, you are going to have to sort of use a bit more advanced knowledge of web development. So responsive, developer required. As I say, Canvas app, yes, you're going to need a developer to make those properly responsive. You won't need one for model-driven app, but you will need a developer to make Power Pages properly responsive. Business process automation. So this is basically what I mean by this is like gateways. So you can have kind of like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Say, for example, you're filling out an application form that might be made up of 3 or 4 different sections about you, about your application, blah, blah, blah. and those are step 1, stage 2, stage 3, or gateway 1, gateway 2. Canvas apps, that isn't built in. You have to kind of build that yourself. Model-driven apps, it is, and Pages, it is as well. Complex data models, Canvas apps isn't basically designed for complex data models. Model-driven apps is, and so is Power Pages. In fact, I should say model-driven apps and Power Pages run on the same back end. So actually, it's really simple. Say, for example, if you've got a Power Pages website, you can spin up a model-driven app off the back of that data really quickly, really quickly. Premium licenses. Now, the number one thing about Canvas apps is the fact that you have Canvas apps included in basically all of your business and enterprise licenses that you already are paying for. So that's probably the reason why you see most Power Apps as actual Canvas apps, because you don't need to pay anything more for them. Especially if you're looking at kind of using something like SharePoint or maybe another database which you already have hosted, like SQL or something like that. You don't necessarily need to have the premium licenses for that. Whereas with model-driven apps and Power Pages, you do require additional premium licenses. Now, the benefit of a model-driven app, as I say, it spins up really quickly. You can host a lot more data, and the user interface is built for you. So that's one of the reasons why a premium license is required, because actually you can build a model-driven app even quicker than you could build a Canvas app, because the user interface is already built for you. Full pages and dialogues, so that's already built into model-driven apps and Pages. Developer required. I often say you don't need a developer for a Canvas app or a model-driven app, but you will need one for PowerApps Pages. Yes, you could technically knock one together without a developer, but to be honest with you, for all the ones which look really good and work seamlessly, I've never seen one built without someone who knows quite a bit about web development. External users, so Canvas apps, model-driven apps, so you can simulate an external user by having a account that person logs in with. You have to license it and things like that. Whereas if you want a true anonymous user, say for example you want to build a customer portal, then you're going to need your PowerApps Pages to do that. Cool. So we're going to jump into planning your project now. Just as a reminder, if you've got any questions, drop them into the Q&A feature as well. So planning your PowerApps project. Now, I break this out into a couple of areas. The first being defining the goals of the project. Now, there's loads of different types of goals that could be the reason what's leading you to have a PowerApps project. It could be that you want to reduce the time and effort required for repetitive manual tasks. It could be to make data entry easier and ensure that data is accessible in real time. There's loads of scenarios where we look at replacing paper-based processes. It's surprising how many even enterprise level companies still have paper-based processes, and making it much easier to capture information. In fact, actually, we were dealing with a project not long ago where a very large sales team was still sending out sales reps on site with pieces of paper to collect information from prospects that are potentially going to be customers. And maybe on that particular form, there was 10 fields. Often only 7 out of 10 would get filled out, and that would cause problems further down the line in the operational side of things after they become a customer, that there's missing information about them, that they couldn't fulfill that order properly because they didn't have the full information. Whereas we replace that paper with a Power App which enforces you cannot progress, you cannot move forwards in the kind of the form until you've filled out the required fields. So now they've always got the information that they need in order to process the sale. Maybe one of the goals is to support a remote or mobile workforce by providing access to tools and data from any location. So as I say, you can replace those kind of paper-based processes with mobile apps, with Power Apps. It could be something that's like we built a Power App to help people who are sort of checking in and checking out from when they're going out traveling on site to visit customers and things like that. It was a nursing home and people dealing with vulnerable people, and they were checking in and checking out of these locations to sort of evidence that they were there and how long they were there for, and making notes of the patients that they were working with. Another goal might be to reduce dependency on IT resources for custom app development. So there's this concept that Microsoft have got, which is called a citizen developer, which is essentially somebody who can build their own apps. And if you are looking at kind of Power Apps, one of the things to consider is how you can enable your own citizen developers in order for them to go and build their own applications. This will reduce the kind of dependency on IT resources to go and have to build the apps themselves. And as long as you get the right structure in place, which we're going to come on to talking about, it's all going to be safe and secure for them to do so. It could be to decrease costs. I mean, to be honest, this is probably one of the number one goals that leads people to actually contacting us about setting up a PowerApps project for them, is to decrease the costs associated with developing and maintaining custom software solutions. So it might be that you're locked in and you've already been using a third-party application, which is very expensive from a licensing perspective. As we've already said, Canvas apps are already using your existing Microsoft licenses, so that could be a way of getting rid of additional costs and spend. So that's one of the main reasons why we see people actually going down the route of starting a PowerApps project. So next, I would say set objectives. So these should be defining measurable goals. What time are you going to save? So if this PowerApps project was successful, what time is going to be saved by deploying this particular PowerApp? Reduce costs. So what costs are going to be reduced? Are you going to be removing third-party applications? Are you going to be saving manual hours of time? What does this kind of look like? Now, this helps all with setting the business case for building out your PowerApps and potentially building even more out into the future. Maybe it's not necessarily about time spent or reducing cost, but maybe it's about improving quality. So going back to that example I was talking about before, where we had a sales team which were missing information about their customers, it led to poor customer experience. It led to poor quality of the delivery of the operational team because they didn't have all the information that they needed. So this could be something that you're making sure things are happening at the right time, you're capturing the right information, people have access to the right information at the right time, there's no duplicates. All these different things are going to help improve the quality of what you're offering to your customers or your employees. Which leads me to the next thing about employee happiness. So quite often a lot of people will leave organizations because they cite that they don't have the technology, they don't have the software, they don't have the tools they need to do their job properly. And again, I imagine that scenario where I was talking about a recent project where we replaced paper. There's probably a lot of people that thought, why are we doing this? Like, especially a younger generation of employees coming through, they're thinking, well, why are we using pen and paper to do this? Like, they use mobile phones and tablets and laptops as part of their personal life all day, every day. And then they're expected to go and use pen and paper during their day job. That's obviously not going to fly. So for employee happiness and general kind of keeping things running smoothly, having applications like this will make people's lives a lot easier. And as a result, it's going to result in more customer satisfaction. So as I say, increasing quality, reducing the amount of time spent, reducing the amount of time you've got to ask a customer for information and things like that. All these things are going to improve the customer satisfaction. It's going to align with organizational goals. So you're setting objectives and you should be looking at ensuring your strategic fit with broader goals. So whatever the broader goals are for the company, whether it is reducing costs or having to reduce the amount of kind of people that need to be recruited in that year or whatever it is, those goals, you should be aligning your project towards those goals as well. And then establish timelines. So set timelines for each of the phases. So for each of these phases that we're talking about, set some realistic timelines so that you know what to expect and you know what to communicate and when. And as I say, communicate them. So make sure there's a plan in place to communicate what's happening with the key stakeholders so that nobody is left out of that mix. Now, that brings me on to the next thing, which is identifying the stakeholders of your project. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be interested in your PowerApps project, and you need to make sure you're engaging with them at the earliest possible stages. So the first is frontline workers, so the people that are actually going to be using these apps. There's no point developing or designing an app in your ivory tower thinking about, oh, how this is going to work. get people, the frontline workers, involved as soon as possible. Now, one of the cool things about PowerApps is because you can build out a proof of concept so quickly, one of the cool things you could do is build out a proof of concept, just take a week, 2 weeks to build out a kind of proof of concept of an application and get them in the hands of the frontline workers to get their thoughts, their what do they think about it, how could it be improved, and start getting that iterative feedback as soon as possible. So when you're talking to the kind of frontline workers, find out how do they currently work. So what is their current working practices? How comfortable are they with tech? And maybe even get some examples of types of apps that they use as part of their day job currently, or even in their personal life. So you get a kind of idea about what experience they've had with applications. Are they comfortable using them on laptops or tablets or mobile phones? And you can kind of feel how they want to engage with these applications. The next type of stakeholders is management. So this is a potential opportunity to meet the management of those frontline workers and say, okay, now how are you going to interact with this application, or how are you going to consume the data that this application is going to be capturing? Maybe it's even a separate user interface that is going to be built for this application for the purposes of reporting. So you can drill into it, and maybe let's say, for example, let's take the example of that sales app that we were talking about before, capturing customer information. There could be a management interface of that where they could actually see all the salespeople, how many sales visits they've been on, how much information has been captured, how many sales have closed as a result of these people, things like that. So the reporting can be driven from the data which is captured from these PowerApps. Then citizen developers, as I was saying before, these people could be potentially helping build or even maintain the PowerApps that you build. So you want to kind of encourage them from an early stage. Now you could do this using sort of some of the Microsoft tools like Viva Engage or Microsoft Teams to build communities of these citizen developers that can share knowledge and work with each other. One of the most common, actually forgotten about stakeholders that can often happen in a project is the IT team. Now, if you're in an IT team, you might think, what? That seems really strange. We see it quite often where we get approached by people. Maybe it's the sort of it could be anyone, to be fair, but it could be, say, a head of HR or a head of marketing or a head of operations or something like that. And they can get very far down the train of planning this project for PowerApps. And actually, no one's spoken to the IT team. So as soon as basically wheels start getting put into motion and the IT team get wind of it, all of a sudden, they're obviously quite rightly concerned by security considerations and things like that. And they can end up sort of putting the brakes on because they weren't consulted, they weren't involved from an early stage. So I must suggest that you do think about bringing in representatives from IT department on your project. I say that they're the people that are going to have the security considerations. They're going to want to know about environments and who's got access and who can do what and that sort of thing from an early stage. Also, get buy-in from finance. At the end of the day, with all these types of projects, especially if you've not done something like this before, you're going to have a business case. You're going to have to basically sell the concept of this to your finance team. So get them involved in some of these workshops and talking about it, talking about the benefits and the goals. Talk to them about the cost savings that are going to come from this to help get that budget approval. Because again, we've seen it a lot of times in the past before, where you can go all the way down the line of kind of planning your project, and at the final hurdle, the budget approval takes ages, and the whole thing gets put on hold. The next area is the design and development phase of your project. Now, the design and development phase, again, is broken out into multiple areas. The first area that I would start off with is the app requirements. So actually talking about not only what your goals are for this Power App, but what are the actual requirements from the apps. Now, this will feed nicely on from the conversations that you had with your stakeholders, because you'll start to understand what devices are they using, or what devices they'd be comfortable to be using. So would they prefer to use this app via a laptop or a tablet or a mobile device? It's also worth considering at this point where those devices are going to come from. Are they going to be corporate issues and your company issued devices, or are they going to be something that's going to be like a bring your own device type of scenario? So again, all these conversations will need to take place. Then I would talk a bit about data. So I would talk about things like how much data are you anticipating you're going to capture. Now, I would do this by reverse engineering. Most times, 9 times out of 10, when we're building PowerApps for our customers, we're replacing an existing process or application. So we already know. It's very rare. Sometimes we do build something that's brand new and it's fresh and it's never been done before, but usually it's something that's being replaced. So you should have a good idea of how much data you'll have by reverse engineering it. Let's go back to that scenario of our salespeople that potentially are going out with pieces of paper and things like that. That customer will have known how many salespeople they had, how many salespeople were going out for meetings, and how many meetings per month there were. So then you could start working out, okay, well, the average amount of meetings per salesperson is X, and then you can calculate that, say, okay, well, in 12 months then, how much data would we anticipate we have inside of our system? Now, the reason why I say this is because this will impact what type of app that you use. If you're looking at large volumes of data, you might need a model-driven app, or it's a bit smaller volumes, you could probably get away with a Canvas app. I'm going to talk a bit about choosing where your data is stored shortly, so I'm just going to wait for that slide that's going to come up soon. You also want to talk about user interface. So thinking about customized versus basic form. So how customized do you want to make this? Now, basically, the rule of I kind of see is that the more time you put into the user interface, the more simplistic, hopefully, you're going to make it. If you don't spend long on a user interface, you'll tend to find it just looks like a series of forms. And some people are happy with that. Some people are fine with that. That's what they expect. That's what they want. Some people want very, very simple, literally just click a button. It asks you a question. You type in the answer, click the next button, and it's all very simplistic rather than it being a big, long-winded form. So you've got to think about how you want it to look and feel and the different types of interfaces. So I would suggest during this phase, go out and have a look, go out and maybe research some other types of applications which are similar, look at the different interfaces, and then agree what the kind of interface you want it to look like. Also, the app requirements need to cover things like internet connectivity. Now, this is something that you take for granted, but you'd be surprised about how reliable an internet connection is impacting the Power App that you're going to build. Also, if people are using it sort of out and about, do you need offline capability? Now, we've worked with a lot of organizations, we've worked with the likes of fire and rescue companies and things like that, who have built apps which are specifically designed to be used offline because they're going to be using them in sort of derelict buildings or somewhere that doesn't have an internet connection. They need to be able to capture information via a Power App, save it offline into the kind of the temporary data that's on a device, and then as soon as they get back onto an internet connection, even automatically uploading that and saving that back into whatever cloud storage area that is decided. Also thinking about licenses. So actually there's license implications, as I was saying before, which also restrict app implications. So depending on what licenses you're going to have will depend on things like how much data you can store, what type of integrations you can have, all these different things. So it's worth thinking about sort of licenses and also whether or not you're going to need external users, because again, that is then going to open the door for different types of licenses or different types of Power Apps that you're going to need to have. Now, these are all just sample topics from a Power Apps workshop that Valto run with our customers. We cover loads more information during those workshops, but this is just to give you a bit of food for thought about the types of things that you should be considering for your app requirements for your project. The next thing is choosing your database. Now, there's loads of places that you could potentially have data stored for your Power Apps project, but I'm just going to be talking about some of the most commonly used ones. So data integration defines your Power App. So depending on where it is, will depend on the user interface that you can do. So I should clarify that. What I mean is model-driven apps can only use Dataverse to store its data. Power Pages can only use Dataverse to store its data. Canvas apps is the only one where we can choose where we're storing our data, and we've got a couple of different options. So the first is Excel. Now, this is fine for if you're building, say, a Power App that's only going to be used by a handful of people. If it's for a small team, you just need a quick app. Let's say, for example, the types of apps I'm talking about here is, let's say, for example, you're going to an event. Maybe you've got you're going to a conference, you've got a table, you're going to be meeting and greeting people, and you want to capture people's information, just their names, phone numbers, things like that. And you don't want to give them a big pad of paper to do that. You want to give them a tablet so they can put their name and details into it. Now, if you're only expecting maybe a couple of hundred people to put their information into the tablet, storing the data in Excel via a Canvas app is perfectly acceptable. It's included in your licenses, so you don't need to worry about paying for anything additional. The next type of area of database would be lists. Now, it's called lists now, but essentially it's a SharePoint list. It's storing data in SharePoint. Now, this is fantastic for when you've got maybe hundreds of thousands of bits of data. So I would probably say, yeah, if you're talking kind of like tens of thousands, maybe up to hundreds of thousands, but realistically tens of thousands is its kind of sweet spot. Then SharePoint lists is perfectly capable of doing this. Again, it's included in your business, your enterprise licenses, so you're not going to have to pay for anything additional. SQL. Now, this is where, say you've got millions or hundreds of thousands to millions of bits of data. When I say bits of data, I mean rows of data. Think of them like rows in an Excel spreadsheet or an Excel table. And SQL is a great place for that, but I would only really advocate that people do this if they've already got SQL set up. So if you've already got SQL set up and you're wanting to pull data to it or push data to it, then that's totally fine. We did a project once with a manufacturer of Windows. They were building Windows and things like that, and they had a SQL database with literally millions of kind of bits of data, from orders to types of windows to all sorts of different things like that. And we built a Canvas app which helped people process orders and look at kind of different types of windows and things like that were being sold, all via a Canvas app which was looking at data in SQL. As I say, I wouldn't recommend, if you are starting to build a new project, that you set up a SQL database, because it does require premium PowerApp licenses. The business applications might already, as I say, only use it if it already is in use. And also SQL as a server, it's going to need maintenance and things like that. Whereas if you're starting from fresh and you do need hundreds of thousands or millions of bits of data, I would suggest that you look at Dataverse. Dataverse is the back end of Dynamics 365. It's the back end of every single model-driven app and every single Power Pages as well. It does require a premium PowerApps license, but as I say, if you are looking at comparing this, it's much cheaper from a cost perspective and easier than setting up a SQL server. So now you should have a good idea about where you could potentially be storing your data. Just as a quick recap, if you want a model-driven app, it has to be Dataverse. If it's Power Pages, it has to be Dataverse. If you have a Canvas app and it's a small app, as in like hundreds of bits of data, Excel. If it's hundreds of thousands, then lists. And if it's millions of bits of data, then Dataverse. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about user interface. So from a user interface perspective, I've broken this down into a couple of different areas. Things to do and don't do. Obviously, this is our don't do. So this is an example of something which is just sort of terrible. The first thing is, don't overcomplicate the design. Everything should have a purpose and less is more. So, I mean, things like having buttons and things like that, you only want to have the buttons that you need to use at that point in time. So having all these additional buttons and things like that is just going to make it too complicated for people. Don't provide multiple pathways. So try and keep it to one or two at a maximum of pathways. What I mean by pathways is things like approve or reject. Just have approve and reject. Then if you're adding things like reassign or delay or comment or things like that, then you're tending to find that you're adding too many options and it can cause confusion. You just want to make it as simple as possible. Are you approving? Are you rejecting? And that's it, essentially. Don't misalign elements of the page. So this, to be honest, is my number one pet peeve. And anyone who's watched any of my YouTube videos or anything like that before, I'm quite sort of OCD a little bit about kind of design and things like misalign. So things like, for example, there's more space between these fields than there are these fields. You can see this red button is slightly above all these other buttons. Things like that drive me wild, and I really dislike it. So having things aligned on the page just makes things work better. And in fact, actually, there was a study done a while ago, which was literally titled "Things Which Look Better Work Better." And essentially, it was somebody built two different calculators as applications. One which looked like it was designed and built by Apple. It was really sleek, sexy, minimalistic design. And the other one was awful, ugly, really hideous, all misaligned and neon colors and things like that. Now, the one which was looked really nice actually didn't work. I think it was something like 1 in 10 times the calculation was completely wrong, whereas the one that was ugly worked every single time. And then they took it to a sort of pilot group to get feedback on it, and they all still said, even though they knew that the first app had faults, they all still preferred that app and rated it higher. So that's why the story was things that look better work better. So don't misunderestimate things like user interface and what that is going to do to the user experience. Don't use too many colors, font sizes. You can see here we've got one type of font size here in the box. We've got another one in the text. We've got another one here. We've got another one across the top up here. We've got loads of different colors. We've got neon colors and reds and blues and all sorts of different things. There's no brand colors in here at all. And the different sizes and things like that, they're all over the place. So there's no consistency to anything. Don't just rely on colors to communicate information as well. Use icons as well. So colors like green and red, obviously they indicate positive and negative. So green being obviously approve, it's positive, go ahead, forward. Red being reject, it's negative. But also you could use icons. You could use things like a thumbs up next to approve, or a thumbs down, or a kind of no entry type sign next to reject, to help people quickly visualize what you're trying to communicate via your app. And the final thing, avoid designing apps for just one screen size. Consider them to be responsive. What would happen if you use this on a mobile phone? So also be thinking about that. So what should we do with our user interfaces? Keep the design consistent. Keep it simple. Stick to a theme or a template. So for example, here we can see we've only got 3 different font sizes. We've got our title, we've got our subtitle, and we've got our kind of body title on here. We're sticking to a theme. It's all got the same kind of colors and fonts throughout. And we're focusing on creating simple, intuitive navigation. Actually, I really love this app, this Power App. It's kind of like, if you remember as a kid, you would have those kind of choose your own ending books and things like that, where you would say, pick page 3 if you want to cross a bridge, or go to page 10 if you want to climb the mountain, or something like that. That's essentially what this app is. So it's helping people choose their own kind of answer, or find an answer by troubleshooting a problem, which is whether or not they can use a certain document, and are they going to infringe on any copyright laws and things like that. And that's just saying, why are you reading this article? And then they can choose the answer by clicking on that. That will take them to the next page, and they can drill down further and further to get the information that they require. I say use icons to quickly identify info. So because this is related to copyright, you can see that we've used these little books here, so you can quickly see that's what that is symbolizing. Avoid overwhelming users. So it's really simple. So as I say in the last slide, we had, I don't know, 5 or 6 buttons, something like that. In this, we literally just have 2 options. You can just pick either the left one or the right one, and it's quickly and simple, and you're not going to overwhelm people with this. We're going to reduce clicks as well. So I'd say with this, you're just clicking once or twice to get to your answer. You're not having to click loads of times to go backwards and forwards between different user interfaces. I would also include feedback alerts. Now, you can't see this in this screenshot, but whenever you're, say, loading a page or something's saved or the app goes offline, you want visual cues to users that this is happening, so that they're not just frantically clicking a button because they think it's not saving. As soon as they click that save button, the first thing that you want to do is load an icon that says, please wait, saving, and or maybe even graze out the button or something like that to stop people from spamming the save button and potentially creating hundreds of items. Same as if it goes offline, the app's probably going to work slightly differently, and it's going to be a cut down version of the functionality. So maybe the colors slightly change or things get locked if it goes offline. Also consider accessibility. So different people are going to need to use the app in different ways. So the colors that you use, the font sizes, how easy it is to read, people with visual kind of impairments, things like that. You need to be considering them as part of the design. So make sure that everybody can use these apps. So the next stage is testing and deployment. So again, breaking this down into a couple of different areas. The first being testing best practices. So what I would always suggest is that you define your test scripts before building. So what does good look like? Define what it needs to do before you've even built it. So say, for example, if it has to ensure that it flags to a user when it is saved and an icon pops up, define that before you even build your app. Keep test cases small. So keep them really small. As I say, define it as a saved icon appears when you click on the save button before it bounces you through to the thank you page or something like that. Keep it nice and simple and small. If it's too large, if it's like a massive thing that says an icon appears, then it saves, and the data must be saved into this particular SharePoint list, and then it does this, and then it does that, and then it does the other, there's plenty of chances that that test could fall down. Every test should have an expected result. So you should have an expected result. So it's say an icon should appear, and then the expected result is it should disappear once the save process is complete. Include user interface tests. Now, this is something that I see all the time people forgetting to do. Include UI tests. So all those things I was telling you before about what is good UI, ensure there are test cases for that. So make sure things like saying, are there icons which are displaying what the purpose of this is? Are we using the right colors? Are all of our fonts readable on every device which is expected to be used? Things like that. Determine what test cases should be automated. So I'm going to come on to talking about automating your tests, your test cases. So you could potentially, especially ones which are going to be very repetitive, things like filling out a form or something like that, you could potentially automate those tests to save your testers time when it comes to actually quality checking the app. Now, to automate tests, we use what's called PowerApps Test Studio. This allows us for testing on individual cases, and testing is an important part of the software development lifecycle. Identify issues and defects early by using these repetitive testing cases. Depending on the size of the app, you might automate these different checks, and testing can become a bottleneck without a proper strategy. PowerApps Test Studio will allow you to write tests using PowerApps expressions as well. So it's all using the same low code formula, and you can play back written tests within the test studio. So you can actually get it to follow you along of what you're doing, filling out a form, get it to record that, and then simulate it again and again. As I say, you might want to test that the form submits when you fill out data in a specific way, but rather than having to do that every single time yourself, why not use Test Studio to automate that? The next thing to talk about is environment best practices. So what I mean by this is maintaining separate environments for development, test, and production. Now, this is something usually your kind of IT department is going to be very keen to understand. And actually, there is different types of environment inside of PowerApps, but you want to break them out into development, test, and production as a minimum. So sometimes people have things like a what they call development, so there's the dev. They have UAT, which is user acceptance testing. They might have pre-prod, which is a pre-production environment, and then they have their production environment. So depending on how big of an organization you are, depending on how complex or how crucial these PowerApps are going to be, well, depending on how serious you take all these different environments. But I would say at a very minimum, have a development environment where you build, your test environment, which should be as close as possible to your production environment. So have plenty of data in there and things like that. And then you have your production environment. Also defining different people are going to have different levels of access to these environments is really good. To be honest, my old school ways of approaching development cycles is that a dev team shouldn't have access to the production environment. They should be able to package their solutions like PowerApps that can move them into test, make sure they work in test, and then move them into production. And they never need to actually access the production environment. Use naming conventions that are easy to understand and follow. So make sure in all of your solution packages and your environments that you're using naming conventions which are easy and aren't riddles. People can understand exactly what they are and what they should be doing. Restrict permissions to environments and individual applications to prevent unauthorized access and changes. As I said before, I don't believe development teams should necessarily have the full access to a production environment because it encourages that they might make some hot fixes and things like that and whatever. But this is just an old school way, I guess, of me thinking about this. Different people might approach it slightly differently, but I would suggest that you consider who has access to these different environments and basically have a plan of how you're going to deploy. Also, regularly back up and test the restore process for your environments. So I've seen too many times, to be honest, people have PowerApps environments and accidentally delete something and they weren't properly backing up their environments and they've ended up losing data. Now, this is something you want to avoid. There are tools that you can use. There's plenty of ways you can avoid losing data by making sure you've got proper backups in place. Also document the deployment process. So how, who, when. I'll probably put that in the wrong order, but there we go. So document it so everybody knows what you're going to do. Ideally, things like don't do updates or deployments on a Friday if you're not going to have anyone there till Monday and things like that. Just have a proper process put in place for your deployments. Again, this is something that Valto can help you define and make sure that you've got everything that you need set up to proper best practices. Then we come on to adoption and support. So the first thing, when we're after we've kind of thinking about the deployment and development and things like that, we need to be thinking about how we're communicating these apps. So develop a communication plan. Target relevant employees and highlight the app upcoming launch. So you want to build up some awareness, some hype around the app of what's coming and when. Create branded internal newsletters or intranet posts. So if you're using SharePoint, use some SharePoint newsletters. If you're using Teams, post into Teams, or Viva, you can post into there as well. Just basically start building up that awareness. I've even seen people having kind of billboards and posters and things like that put up around their office so that people know that these types of things are coming. You could also do things like basically you want to set up a dedicated communication channel, so allow employees to ask questions, show excitement, but also you could do things like having naming competitions for apps to get people to buy into it from an early stage, because realistically the hardest part of the adoption phase is to make sure that people understand the value of the app and make sure that they feel like it's part of their day-to-day work. So if they're naming it and they're involved with it and they're giving feedback on it from early stages, they're much more likely to adopt it in the long run. So get stakeholder feedback. Now, it is optional, but I do recommend that you have a pilot group. So pilot the application to a group of users, potentially even run it in parallel with existing processes so you can compare it. How well is it doing against the existing process that you have in place? But no, it's really important to get stakeholder feedback, and this could include anonymous surveys as well if you wanted to. If you felt like people were just going to give sort of almost like fake blowing smoke up your kind of like feedback to say, oh, it's fantastic, it's great, but actually there's something that's not quite right about it, or something that's making their life even harder or more challenging or something like that, maybe think about creating some surveys using Microsoft Forms to collect feedback and use it as iterative feedback to update your sort of application. Speak with process owner and the head of departments for a gut feel on how people are sort of interacting with it. So again, sit down with the kind of the management team, the kind of team leaders, and just sort of say, what are people saying about the app? What do they think? How's it working? Has it met the requirements of what we're trying to do? Host group discussions to review feedback. So something else that we've seen people doing is maybe do an anonymous survey with people, maybe get feedback, maybe it isn't anonymous. But always get people together, maybe in a group discussion, and just sort of say, this is the feedback that we've had. what do people think about it? Can we elaborate on it? Can we drill into a little bit more? Can we get some more kind of feedback from you? And then finally, plan to iterate changes into the system. So it's all well and good taking this feedback, but make sure you take it back to your app and build it out and change that. Now, when we are building apps for our customers, we always make sure that apps go through what we call UAT, which is user acceptance testing, where they go away, play with it, make sure they're happy with it, make sure it fits all the requirements and all the things that we agreed during the workshop to make sure that they're happy with the application. And then we'll make any changes to the system to make sure that it's fit for purpose. Then I would consider the usage reporting. So it's one thing getting people's kind of like feedback and their thoughts and their gut instincts on the app, but cold hard data never lies. And now you can use data-driven reporting from inside the PowerApps Admin Center, which allows you for reports for all PowerApps actually, or you can choose to be specific to your Power App that you have built. You can monitor the usage of the app. You can see things like daily activity of the users locations of where they're using it from, the devices that they're using, any errors or performance issues that are being flagged in the application. So you can actually see over time how it's being used to make sure that it's being adopted. If, say, for example, there was a big burst right at the beginning and then had a bit of a drop off, rather than waiting weeks or months down the line to find out that people are not necessarily using the app anymore, you could be looking at this on a daily basis and see that well ahead of time, and then, as I say, revisit your adoption strategy and maybe boost things back up again. One of the other things as part of an adoption strategy is to make sure you've got a champions network. So identify and train champions. Now, these don't have to be citizen developers, but they could be the same people. Realistically, your champions are more like people that are just going to be championing or kind of promoting the use and benefits of your app. So select from relevant teams, act as early adopters and advocates of the application, so they can say, look, guys, this is great, this is fantastic, look at what this can do. Equip them with advanced skills, so provide advanced knowledge so they have a bit more information about the app, how it works, what it's doing, things like that. Offer troubleshooting skills, so maybe they're not going to be full citizen developers, but maybe you could tell them, okay, if something like this happens, this is how you fix it, or whatever it is, or helping people to kind of use the app easier. Essentially, they're there to help support their peers, their team members, their department, their colleagues to use that application and instill the kind of adoption journey. Establish regular meetings. So you want to be having regular meetings to share insights, discuss best practices, and then, as I use things like Viva Engage communities or Microsoft Teams to share knowledge. So say, for example, you've got a champion from each kind of team that's going to be using this app or series of apps. You could have the champions have a Viva Engage community or a Microsoft team where they could all ask each other questions, or maybe say, oh, forgot, how does the app do X, Y, and Z? And then someone else could reply to that and say, oh, this is how it does it. So it takes that kind of need for support off IT teams and the kind of stakeholders of the original project. Also think about support structure. So a dedicated help desk. Now, this might be dedicated people that are going to deal with PowerApps, or it might be that you train up your IT support team in order to answer any questions. It's also worth mentioning that Valto offer a number of different ways of outsourcing PowerApps support, whether it be first line support or very technical solution architecture type of support if you're needing to build on your PowerApps even further. We have a few different types of options there, from managed service agreements to pay-as-you-go type of arrangements. So if you need any support with PowerApps, obviously you can get in touch with us. Also, from a support point of view, think about knowledge bases. Build out some FAQs about the app, troubleshooting guides that you could provide to your IT team if they found any problems, and just general best practices of what they should be doing and how they should be using the app. And then also making sure there's a feedback mechanism. So I said this before, but make sure there's ways that people can report issues or suggestions for improvements via maybe a SharePoint intranet, Microsoft Teams, or Viva Engage community, just ways that they can provide feedback so that the app doesn't kind of just stall and doesn't get any further iterations of improvements. Cool. So coming up to the end now. Now I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't tell you about how Valto can help you with your PowerApp project. Now, what we would do is we offer a free 1-hour consultation. This is with one of our PowerApps experts, where we can talk to you about what PowerApps project you have coming up and how we could potentially help you, what you're concerned about, and how we can alleviate those concerns. Following on from that, we start off the kind of the ball rolling with a paid engagement, which is a PowerApps workshop. It's only £1,500, and this is at the time of recording, but as I say, it's not necessarily a particularly expensive engagement compared to a lot of other competitors. Essentially, we just want to make sure that you fully understand the scope of your PowerApp. The objective of the PowerApps workshop is to scope out the requirements of your business application and ensure you are prepared for the upcoming project. It also follows on with following on from the workshop, a full report with your requirements, all of our findings and recommendations, along with a fixed price to build your PowerApp. Now, Microsoft have also given us a specific specialization award, which is the adoption change management, because of all the good work that we've done with our customers to help them not only build out their PowerApps, but also make sure that they're properly adopted, because you don't want to spend money on building out an application, time and money and effort and things like that, and then it slowly dwindles off. You want to make sure that it's properly embedded into your ways of working and it stays around forevermore. Now, those workshops essentially are rough agenda would be a bit of an introduction to ourselves, understanding your current ways of working, setting those objectives as we looked at the beginning of this webinar, making sure you understand the different types of PowerApps and give you some examples of PowerApps, understanding your requirements. So actually, what do you need this to do? We'll then give you guidance on the preparation, so investigating how much data is going to be, where it's going to be stored, how much there's going to be, what stakeholders are going to be involved, and how we're going to win them over to make sure this project is a success. Licenses, so who should be licensed, how should it be licensed, what the cost implications going to be. Quite often we can look at a solution and say, okay, well, if you were to invest X amount of money into the licenses, then you could have this type of application. Whereas if you don't do that, these would be the restrictions, and this is the type of application that you could expect to be delivered. And then finally, we talk about adoption. So the Valto, as a Valto adoption specialist, so we run you through our full adoption program, how we ensure that your app is properly adopted by your organization, the training options and guides and materials, what we can do for you, how we provide our training, how we can provide recordings and videos and things like that, and overall our adoption strategy and materials. So basically, what you've seen in today's webinar is a kind of drop in the ocean of what we cover in one of those PowerApps workshop sessions. So if you think that's of benefit, of use to you, please do contact us. As I say, if you're live watching this, there is a link inside of the Q&A feature of the webinar. If you're watching it and recorded, there's a link in the description below to contact us. As I say, we start off with a free 1-hour consultation. So we talk to you, find out what it is you're trying to achieve, and discuss potential options going forward. So now this brings us on to a Q&A. I'm just going to go and have a little look at the Q&A section for any questions that have been asked. So there's one question here. Are you able to provide an approximate cost to deliver an app to provide appointment booking? Now, I love these types of questions when people ask me how much would something cost, and it really is a kind of how long is a piece of string. Now, let me answer this a little bit further. What I mean by that is there's so many different variations of that. So someone's asked here about how much would it cost to have an appointment booking system? Now, there's loads of different variations of that. Is that for internal people, staff? Is that for external people? How many bookings are you expecting to take? Are you expecting to take payment for the bookings? There's so many questions as a solution architect that are flowing through my head right now of what this could be. So unfortunately, no, I can't tell you exactly a cost of what that would be because of all these different variations. Now, what I can tell you, though, is we can always build a solution for whatever budget you have. It just might not be the bells and whistles and things like that of a massive system. There's going to be there's going to be a difference between a system which is worth £10,000 and a system that's worth £100,000. There's going to be massive differences of what you can do and what you can achieve. Also implications of things like licenses and things like that sometimes, depending on what you're building, on your budget and things like that. The licenses element of it is also part of the consideration. It's not just how much it is to build out an app. So unfortunately, I can't answer that exact question for you to tell you exactly how much that will cost, because I say there's a lot of different variations that are involved with that. I say, if there's any more questions, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A feature. I'm just going to cycle through a couple more. What's your number one tip relating to adoption of PowerApps? I mean, we've covered off quite a bit in here, and inside of the PowerApps workshop, we cover off so much more. But to me, it's involve users, and not just users, but all stakeholders you can possibly think of as early a stage as possible. You don't want the app to be a surprise to people. If it feels like it's a surprise, they've not seen it coming, it will just make that adoption process so much longer. You want people to know that it's coming, what's going to happen, when you think that the previous process will be retired, all these different things, and be communicating those. So that's already started off people's adoption journey, because they're starting to accept what's coming down the line, especially if you're dealing with people who are maybe not so tech savvy, or they don't necessarily feel comfortable with new apps and processes and things like that. Letting them know as early as possible allows them time to adjust to that. Another question, what challenges could we expect during deployment? So there's loads, to be honest, there's loads of challenges. It's just knowing how to mitigate them. The first one I've seen quite commonly when people have so these are scenarios where people have tried to launch PowerApps and it's not gone very well, and they've come to Valto and we've helped them. One of those scenarios was that users not having the correct access. So a team of people built out an app and they were testing it, but they were all testing it. There was only, I don't know, 4 or 5 of them, something like that. They're building out the app and they were testing it and they thought, oh, this is great, this is fantastic. They went to launch it and they realized that all the kind of security, the permissions, the roles that are assigned inside of the app were all not configured at all. And that was one of those kind of problematic issues. So we helped them basically roll back the app, take it back, also come up with a kind of communications plan to help them sort of properly communicate to the business, start their adoption journey, but then also help them defining proper security roles and groups that are controlled by, say, security groups and things like that, and making sure it's all properly set up for them. Other common problems as well can be things like too much data. So especially with things like Canvas apps, you can run into what they call delegation issues, where you've got basically you're calling too much data. You can't work with all of the data in one kind of bucket. You have to kind of silo it out a little bit. And again, we've dealt with a lot of those types of scenarios and help people properly architect the data that's in the background of these apps. Cool. Let's have a look. Cool. Maybe there's one more question. How can PowerApps integrate with Power BI? Now, good question, because when we talk about reporting, obviously PowerApps are generating a lot of data and storing that in the background, and then you want to report on it. Often when you're talking about PowerApps, because it's part of the Power Platform, you've also got Power BI, part of the Power Platform, that you can tap into the data. So PowerApps itself doesn't necessarily store the data. It's something in the background, so Power BI can tap into that. So you can integrate it by using Power BI to look at wherever the data is being stored by PowerApps, whether it be a SharePoint list, Excel, SQL, database, wherever it is, and then create reports in Power BI. But the interesting thing about this is you can also then take that Power BI report and embed it back into a Power App. So actually, if you wanted to surface the kind of reporting of the data which is being captured by that Power App within the Power App, you can do that as well. It's a little bit like Inception, where it's kind of like an app within an app a little bit, but you can do that. So I've seen that quite a lot before, where things are being processed and you want to provide that kind of reporting back to the users themselves. You can embed that Power BI directly back into the Power App. Well, unfortunately, I have overrun a little bit here, but I just want to thank you so much for joining today's webinar. If you do have any questions or you would like to book your free 1-hour PowerApps consultation, as I say, there is a link in the Q&A. We are going to send out the recording as well to everyone who's joined. So all you have to do is respond to that and let us know if you'd like to book your 1-hour free PowerApps consultation. And of course, keep your eyes peeled for more webinars from Valto in the future. Thank you.